More than 60 years have passed since the disappearance of 5 young children from the Sodder family, but this tragic Christmas mystery remains unsolved to this day. For nearly 4 decades, every driver who drove along Route 16 past Fayetteville, West Virginia, USA, could see a bulletin board with grainy photos of 5 children with dark hair and a serious look. Below them were their names and ages: Maurice, 14 years old, Martha, 12 years old, Louis, 9 years old, Jenny, 8 years old, Betty, 5 years old, as well as the alleged information about what happened to them. On Christmas Eve, 1945, the house where we lived was burned to the ground, and 5 of our children, the youngest child was 5 years old, the oldest was 14, were kidnapped. Authorities called the cause of the fire faulty wiring, despite the fact that after the fire started, the light in the house was still burning. According to the official report, our children died in the fire. However, no remains were found at the site of the fire. The smell of burned flesh during and after the fire was also not observed. What was the motive of the representatives of the law? Why did they make us suffer all these years of fighting injustice? For what purpose did they lie and force us to accept this lie? Fayetteville was and is a small town with a single main street that extends no more than 100 meters, and rumors have always been more readily believed than hard evidence. God only knew what had happened to the children. All anyone knew for sure was that on the night before Christmas in 1945, George and Ginny Sodder, along with their 9 children, there were 10 in all, the eldest son was in the army, went to bed. About 1 o'clock in the morning, a large fire broke out. George, Jenny, and 4 children managed to get out of the burning house. What happened to the other kids, no one knows. George tried to save them. He broke a window to get inside the house, and injured his hand with a sharp glass. He could see nothing through the thick smoke and raging fire that engulfed all the rooms on the lower floor, the living room, dining room, kitchen, study, and adult bedroom. In his mind, George ran through the following information: 2-year-old Sylvia, whose crib was in their bedroom, was safe on the street, as was her sister, 17-year-old Marion, and 2 brothers, 23-year-old John and 16-year-old George Jr., who, leaving his room on the 2nd floor, accidentally singed his hair. But where were Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty? They must be huddled in their bedrooms at the other end of the corridor, divided in half by a staircase that was now engulfed in flames. George ran out into the street in the hope of reaching them through the window, but the ladder he always kept near the house had mysteriously disappeared. It was nowhere to be found. Then he came up with an idea: to drive one of the 2 coal trucks to the house and use it to climb through the window. However, they both did not want to start, despite the fact that they had worked perfectly the day before. George began searching his mind for other options. He tried to scoop water from the rain barrel, but it was frozen. 5 of his children were inside the house on fire. George did not notice that sticky blood was oozing from the wound on his arm. He shouted for his sons and daughters. His daughter, Marion, rushed to a neighbor's house to call the fire department, but she could not get through to the service. Another neighbor who saw the flames from a distance called from a nearby tavern, but again no operator answered. Enraged, he drove to the city and found the fire chief, F.J. Morris, who triggered the Fayetteville version of the fire alarm. He called one firefighter, who in turn alerted another informed a third, and so on. The fire station was only 4 kilometers from the Sodder family home, but the fire department didn't arrive until 8 in the morning. By then, George and Ginny's house was a pile of ashes. George and Ginny thought that Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty were dead, but their remains were not found at the site of the burned house. The fire chief suggested that the blaze was so strong that it cremated the children's bodies. The police inspector, after examining the ruins of the house, called the cause of the fire faulty wiring. The coroner's office issued the Sodder family 5 death certificates just before the new year. They said the children died as a result of fire or suffocation. However, George and Ginny eventually began to think that their children might be alive.